They tried to bury you, but they didn't realize you were the seed. Let that echo for a second, my dear chosen ones. Because the truth is, every attempt to crush you, every scheme to frame you, every whisper behind your back, it wasn't meant to just hurt. It was meant to erase. They wanted you gone, forgotten, and rewritten as nothing more than a cautionary tale. But here you are, still standing, still dangerous, still glowing with a power they can't counterfeit. And let's call it what it really is. Your enemies were betting on your destruction like gamblers at a fixed fight. They stacked the odds, wrote the script, and even built the stage. They thought they had it all figured out. Criminal charges loading, reputation sabotaged, inheritance stolen. They imagined you broken, begging, stripped of everything that was rightfully yours. But the punchline is this: you flipped the entire narrative without even playing their game. Chosen ones, understand this. Being hated was never personal. It was positional. They saw you as a threat because you carried something they couldn't touch. Power, presence, a frequency they couldn't replicate. The very fact that you walked into rooms and shifted the energy without saying a word exposed their fraud. And what do frauds do when the real one shows up? They panic, they scramble, they plot, they throw mud hoping it sticks. They pull strings hoping you'll choke. They create false charges hoping the crowd will believe the headlines. But here's the question you might be asking yourself right now. Why me? Why do they keep coming after me? Because, chosen one, your very existence is a disruption. You weren't put here to play by their rules. You were born to expose the game. They hate you not because you failed, but because you refused to. They hate you because every attack that should have broken you became the reason you leveled up. You turned sabotage into stamina. You turned betrayal into blueprint. You turned loss into leverage. Imagine a sniper lining up the perfect shot, steady hands, perfect scope. And right as they pull the trigger, the gun jams. That's what your enemies felt. They set the trap, rehearsed the story, even celebrated your downfall in advance. Yet every single time, something shifted. They couldn't explain why the dirt they dug for you ended up becoming their own pit. They couldn't explain why the charges didn't stick, why the inheritance slipped back into your hands, why your name refused to rot in the mud they dragged it through. That's not luck. That's proof of who you are. A chosen one doesn't just survive. A chosen one rewrites the ending. And don't get it twisted. Your survival isn't quiet. It's a glitch in their entire system. They wake up restless because the one thing they can't silence is your presence. You're not just a person who slipped away from destruction. You're the living evidence that their power has limits, and nothing terrifies them more than the chosen one they couldn't break. So here's what I need you to hear. You are not the villain in their script, no matter how many lies they write. You are not the failure they prophesied, no matter how many traps they set. You are not the broken one they painted in gossip circles. You are the disruption they never planned for, the unedited chapter they can't rewrite, the headline they can't control. So sit up straight, chosen one. Let them keep plotting, let them keep whispering, let them keep building their little case. Because every scheme they load against you only fuels your rise. You're not just walking away with what was stolen. You're walking away with a story so undeniable that even your enemies have to watch in silence. This isn't just an inheritance case. This is the idiom of your life. They tried to cast you as the criminal, but you walked out crowned as the heir. And that, chosen one, is the kind of justice no courtroom on earth can overturn. And, chosen one, before we dive deeper into this wild inheritance battlefield, pause for a second. If this message is already striking chords in your chest, that's not random. That's recognition. Only the truly chosen will resonate with this, because not everybody survives false charges and walks out with the crown still shining. If you know you're one of them, lock in right now, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop 777 in the comments so I know you're tuned in with the ones who turn accusations into ammunition. Your energy here isn't just support. It's proof that you can't be erased. Stay with me, because what's coming next is going to feel like your own story being read out loud. Let's step into it. Number 1, they never hated you. They feared the fire inside you. They never hated you, they feared your fire. They don't hate the flame, chosen one. They hate the fact that no matter how much water they throw, you keep burning hotter. My dear chosen ones, let's cut through the noise. People never despised you for who you were on paper. They weren't obsessed with your mistakes or flaws. What rattled them to the core was the energy you carried, the undeniable weight of your presence, the fire they couldn't smother. You walked into rooms without a title, without a trophy, without flashing credentials, and yet somehow the entire atmosphere bent around you. That's what scared them. That's why they plotted. Because you didn't have to prove yourself, you were the proof. And isn't it strange? You kept asking yourself, why me? Why are they always pressed about me when I'm just trying to live my life? The answer is simple, chosen one. It was never about your actions. It was about your aura. You revealed what was false just by existing authentically. Lies can survive a long time in silence, but the moment truth walks in, even unspoken, those lies start crumbling. You didn't expose people by calling them out. You exposed them just by being there. That's why they couldn't stand you. Think about it. Have you noticed how quickly some folks switched when you entered their circle? They smiled in your face, but behind the scenes, they were running audits on your every move, studying you like a threat report. You thought you were building friendships. They were building blueprints to box you in. You thought they were riding with you. They were plotting detours to bury you. That's not paranoia. That's pattern. And here's the kicker. Deep down, they knew they couldn't copy what you had. They couldn't buy it. They couldn't kill it. They couldn't even fully explain it, and that drove them mad. So instead of facing their own emptiness, they tried to dim your shine, clip your wings, mute your voice. They whispered lies, stirred up drama, threw shadows in your path, all in the hopes that you'd finally shrink small enough for their comfort. But let's be brutally honest, chosen one, your kindness was their loophole. You still tried to love them through it. You gave them grace, space, and loyalty they didn't deserve. You thought patience would turn them into allies. Instead, they doubled down on trying to turn you into prey. And still, you didn't fold. That's the part they can't stand. Every attempt to dim you only proved you were the real thing. Understand this. You weren't targeted because you were weak. You were targeted because you were authentic. The attacks weren't evidence of your failure. They were confirmation of your power. You were the mirror that refused to lie. And when people can't stomach their own reflection, they don't change the truth. They try to smash the mirror. But here's the part that burns them most. You never shattered. You rose sharper, brighter, untouchable. So, chosen one, wear this truth like armor. They never hated you. They feared the fire inside you. And the more they tried to contain it, the bigger the blaze became. That's why no matter what charges they load, no matter what traps they set, the narrative will always glitch in your favor. Because you weren't born to blend in with shadows, you were born to expose them. Number 2, the real mission wasn't to wound you, it was to rewire you. They didn't just want to hurt you, they wanted to rewrite you. Breaking bones is easy. Breaking a mind, that's the enemy's favorite sport. Chosen one, listen closely. Your enemies weren't satisfied with seeing you stumble. No, that was too small for the scale of their obsession. What they really wanted was to reprogram you, to strip you of the core that made you unpredictable, unstoppable, untouchable. They didn't just want to scratch your skin, they wanted to rewire your soul. That's why their attacks weren't always loud. Sometimes it was just a sarcastic comment slipped in like poison. Other times it was silence that screamed louder than words. Then came the guilt trips, the sly manipulation, the "you're overreacting" gaslighting. All of it designed not to wound you once, but to bend you permanently. Their goal wasn't pain, it was control. If they could make you question your memory, your worth, your own voice, then they'd never need to silence you. You'd silence yourself. Think about it, chosen one. How many times did you walk around with your head down, replaying conversations, wondering if you were crazy? That was no accident. That was programming. They wanted you obedient, exhausted, confused, and small. They wanted the fire in you dimmed so badly that you'd forget you ever carried it. Because here's the truth. The moment you fully embraced your own power, they would be exposed as powerless, and that terrified them. So they chipped away, one betrayal at a time, one manipulation at a time. Not enough for the world to notice, but just enough to keep you off balance. That's how they built their case against you, hoping the criminal charges would land not in the courtroom but inside your own mind. They didn't want to just rob you of inheritance. They wanted to rewrite your inheritance into their favor by making you a shadow of yourself. But here's what they underestimated. Even when you didn't have the language to describe what was happening, you felt it. Deep inside, your instincts kept whispering, "This isn't right. This isn't me." You didn't fold. You questioned. You resisted. You fought back silently, and every time you did, the programming glitched. That's why you're still here, chosen one, because they couldn't overwrite what was never theirs to touch. You didn't just survive abuse. You escaped a system designed to erase your identity. They wanted you to be a puppet. Instead, you became proof that no amount of gaslighting, sabotage, or manipulation can overwrite a chosen one's original design. And now, every scar is a firewall. Every memory they tried to twist is a weapon sharpened against them. Chosen one, they didn't just fail to break you, they failed to replace you. And that's the kind of defeat they'll never recover from. Number 3. Your downfall wasn't meant to be silent. It was scripted as a spectacle. They didn't want you gone. They wanted your fall to be a show. They didn't just want to see you fall, chosen one. They wanted front row seats to the premiere of your destruction. My dear chosen ones, understand this. Your enemies weren't satisfied with just plotting behind your back. No, that wasn't enough. They didn't just want to hurt you quietly in the shadows where no one else would notice. They wanted your collapse to be loud, public, humiliating. They wanted your pain to be the headline, your breakdown to be the meme, your losses to be their entertainment. They dreamed of criminal charges flashing across your name, of your inheritance snatched from your hands, of people pointing at you saying, "See, they were never special. Just another fraud who couldn't keep it together." It was never random cruelty. It was a scripted performance. They rehearsed the lines of fake concern, ready to play innocent in public while savoring your downfall in private. Some hoped to push you into isolation, then laugh and call you distant. Others tried to chip away at your peace, praying for depression to consume you so they could stamp you with the label unstable. They whispered, stirred, and staged scenes like directors setting up the perfect finale where you'd lose not only the case, not only your reputation, but your very identity. But here's where their plan backfired, chosen one. They underestimated you. They counted on the weaker version of you, the one that once craved approval, the one that kept giving chances to people who only fed you poison. They expected you to self-destruct. What they didn't see coming was your evolution. The pain they engineered became your training ground. Every push toward collapse only forged a version of you they could never script. You stopped needing their validation. You stopped begging for seats at tables built on lies. You stepped out of their theater, and in doing so, you cancelled the entire production. And look at the irony. What they thought would be your tragic ending turned into your transformation. Your stumble wasn't defeat. It was the very crack that let a stronger version of you emerge. Instead of headlines screaming about your failure, whispers now circle about your resilience. Instead of your name becoming a cautionary tale, it's becoming the one story that unsettles them at night. Because nothing eats at them more than watching the chosen one they tried to bury rise higher than ever, while they're left choking on their own script. Chosen one, let this sink in. Your destruction was never denied by accident. It was delayed, so the same audience that came to witness your funeral now has to watch your ascension. That is the real show, and you're not the tragedy, they are. Number 4. Some who smiled at you weren't allies, they were undercover handlers. They weren't friends, they were handlers in disguise. Not every hand on your shoulder is there to guide you, some are just pressing down to keep you from standing tall. My dear chosen ones, let's get raw about this part of the story, because this is where it stings the most. The people you trusted, the ones who laughed with you, ate with you, maybe even shared blood with you, some of them weren't allies at all. They weren't here to lift you, they were here to study you, to monitor you, to keep you boxed in so you'd never fully claim what was yours. And in a battle as high stakes as an inheritance case with false charges hovering over your head, the last thing you needed was secret handlers pulling strings from the inside. But that's exactly what was happening. They played roles so well you almost gave them awards. They disguised control as concern, sabotage as support, and distraction as love. Every time you shared your vision, they watered it down. Every time you showed your strength, they found subtle ways to remind you not to reach too high. They didn't want you breaking free because your freedom meant the end of their control. They had no interest in seeing you win your case, claim your rights, or rise to your full potential. No, what they wanted was access to your energy, your ideas, and your vulnerability. And because you're chosen, they knew you had a different kind of influence, so they had to keep it locked. This was psychological warfare in slow motion. They memorized your weaknesses, tested your limits, and twisted your words to fit their agendas. They weren't cheering for you. They were gathering intel. They weren't protecting you. They were plotting your detour. And what made it work for so long was simple. You trusted them. That trust gave them the perfect cover. But here's where the story flips. Even though they worked overtime to clip your wings, your spirit refused to stay grounded. You started waking up. You noticed the patterns. You saw the strings. You stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening in good faith. And the moment you stepped out of their loop, their masks slipped. Some turned cold, others lashed out, some vanished overnight. Because when handlers realize the chosen one they've been managing is no longer under control, panic sets in. Their tactics stop working. Their script falls apart. And now here you are, still standing, still chosen, still claiming what was always yours. Those handlers, they're nothing more than exposed ghosts of a system that failed to break you. Their purpose collapsed the moment you recognized your own power. And nothing terrifies them more than that. Number 5. The battle wasn't new. You were chosen to end a cycle centuries deep. The case was older than you, but you were the first to break the chain. They thought you'd inherit the curse. Instead, you inherited the courage to end it. Chosen one, let's call this what it really is. What you faced wasn't just random drama, bad luck, or one toxic person out to get you. Number. This was a case filed against your bloodline long before you were born. A silent trial that passed from one generation to the next. Secrets stacked like evidence, dysfunction sealed like contracts, trauma handed down like inheritance. Every branch before you carried it, but none of them broke it. Until you. And isn't that wild? You didn't volunteer for this courtroom battle. It landed on you. You walked into the fire thinking it was just your own storm, but little by little you realized the truth. This wasn't just about you. This was about centuries of silence, betrayal, and unspoken agreements that everyone else either ignored, excused, or normalized. They expected you to follow the same script, accept the curse, repeat the pain, pass it forward like a hidden will. But chosen ones don't do reruns. You chose disruption. You said, "It ends with me." Think about it. Every time you called out a lie, every time you questioned the normal behavior that was anything but normal, every time you refused to keep playing a role in their twisted performance, the entire system started glitching. That's why the attacks on you felt heavier than they should have. That's why relatives turned cold, friends betrayed, enemies multiplied. Because this wasn't just personal beef, it was generational warfare. The moment you stopped carrying their baggage, the whole machine panicked. And let's be clear, chosen one, they wanted you to believe the chaos was punishment, that you had messed up, that you were cursed. But in reality, it was proof you were pulling the plug. You weren't cursed. You were the code breaker. And when a code breaker shows up, the program collapses. The inheritance case they thought they'd trap you in wasn't just about money, property, or reputation. It was about legacy. They bet you'd inherit dysfunction and stay silent. But you shocked everyone by flipping the script and walking away with clarity instead of chains. You weren't the heir to their curse. You were the executor of its ending. So understand this. Your rise wasn't just survival. It was historical. You rewrote the verdict for everyone coming after you. And whether they admit it or not, your very existence now stands as living proof. The curse is broken and the legacy begins brand new with you. Number 6. You had to face raw darkness so you'd never glamorize poison again. They forced you to see the ugly so you'd never be blinded by it again. The mask fell off, chosen one, and once you saw the face beneath it, you could never unsee it. My dear chosen ones, let's not sugarcoat this. You weren't handed soft lessons wrapped in kindness. You were dragged into the raw, uncut reality of betrayal, deception, and sabotage. You didn't just hear about how ugly envy could be. You lived in its crosshairs. You didn't just read about manipulation. You tasted it in conversations that pretended to be love, but were laced with poison. And let's be real, that cut deep. It wasn't theory. It wasn't rumor. It was personal. Think about it. How many times did you trust someone who used your trust like currency against you later? How many nights did you sit across a table where the smile was wide, but the knife was already aimed at your back? You weren't naive, you were chosen. And chosen ones always get introduced to reality without filters, because ordinary people can stay asleep in the illusion, not you. You had to see the ugly unmasked, so you'd never bow to it again. At first you thought it was punishment. You asked yourself, why am I the one who always gets betrayed? Why am I the one who sees the fake smiles turn into daggers? But chosen one, that wasn't punishment. That was training. You were being built into someone who could no longer be fooled by charm, charisma, or smooth talk. You learned the hard way that not all attention is affection, not all access is loyalty, and not all love is real. Now let's bring it back to this inheritance war. Criminal charges, fake accusations, staged narratives. You weren't blindsided when the mask slipped. You recognized the pattern instantly because you had lived it before in smaller arenas. The betrayal in friendships was practice. The sabotage in love was rehearsal. By the time they came with something as heavy as false charges, you were already immune. You'd already built the radar. You could smell fake support from a mile away, and that's why they failed. Chosen one, you are dangerous now. Not because you hurt anyone, but because you can't be seduced by masks anymore. You don't romanticize toxicity. You've bled from it. You don't mistake flattery for loyalty. You've seen how it flips. That's the edge you carry now. The very pain they thought would destroy you became your armor. The scars became your radar. The betrayal became your blueprint. So let the enemies keep playing dress-up with charm and fake concern. You've seen the raw face behind the mask, and once a chosen one sees it, the spell is broken forever. You'll never be blinded again. And that, chosen one, is why you're untouchable in this fight. Number 7. Your silence was never weakness. It was a weapon loading in the shadows. Your silence wasn't ignored. It was your ultimate weapon. Your quiet wasn't weakness. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't confusion. No, my dear chosen ones, it was a calculated strategy that your enemies could never decode. While they whispered, schemed, and danced in petty victory, you stayed still. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you were in a zone they couldn't touch. A hidden space where your energy wasn't wasted on proving yourself to the unworthy. They thought your silence was a loss, proof you'd finally bent to their manipulations. But little did they know, you were building a storm inside. Every second of quiet was a strategic move. You were dismantling false identities, severing toxic ties, and discarding narratives that weren't yours. Your mind and spirit were sharpening like a weapon. To the outside world, it looked like inactivity, like defeat. But inside, it was a command center. Every thought, every reflection, every pause was loaded with precision. You were learning to read situations that no one else could see, to hear intentions that others tried to hide, to predict moves they hadn't even considered. Your silence was not emptiness, it was pure, unshakable preparation. They kept pushing, kept provoking, trying to bait a reaction, hoping to pull you into chaos. But your chosen ones, your quiet, became a mirror reflecting their own inadequacy. Every time you didn't react, didn't fold, didn't explain yourself, power stacked inside of you. You weren't cornered, you were charging. They saw stillness. You were a missile being locked onto your target. They assumed they had the upper hand, that the game was over. But your pause was the prelude to their surprise. And now, the rise, the glow, the undeniable authority in your voice. They won't see it coming. Doors that were once closed slam open at your approach. Influence builds effortlessly. Every move you make becomes proof that their schemes failed. Let them wonder, let them question, let them panic. You don't owe explanations. Your elevation will speak louder than any words, louder than any scheme, louder than their wildest expectations. Your silence, my dear chosen ones, was never absence. It was power in motion, and the world is about to feel the shockwave. Number 8. Your rise didn't just expose them. It detonated every lie they built. Chosen one, understand this with the gravity it deserves. Your rise wasn't some gentle, graceful unfolding that slipped quietly into the world. No, what happened when you ascended was an explosion, an uncontainable blast that tore through every blueprint your enemies drafted, every false narrative they rehearsed, every whispered accusation they thought would stick to your name like tar. The moment you stepped into your power, the moment you rose from the pit they dug for you, the moment you reclaimed the inheritance they tried to steal through manipulation, deception, and those symbolic criminal charges loading, you didn't just expose their intentions, you detonated them. Your victory wasn't passive. It was a spiritual bomb that vaporized every lie they spent years engineering. And the most poetic part, you didn't even have to fire a shot. Your rise alone, your glow, your healing, your strength, your clarity became the explosion. It was the shockwave that rippled through their schemes and shattered them so violently that even the people who once believed the lies now see the truth bleeding through the cracks. Because when a chosen one rises, they don't rise quietly. They rise as a disruption to every false system built around their downfall. They rise with a force that flips tables in the spiritual courtroom, cancels every fabricated accusation, and exposes every hidden hand behind the sabotage. You didn't just walk out of the narrative they wrote for you. Your elevation lit that entire script on fire. Your comeback was so undeniable that it forced everyone who once doubted you to confront their own gullibility. They had spent so much time crafting stories about you, stories meant to smear you, stories meant to turn allies against you, stories meant to frame you as unstable, unworthy, untrustworthy, that they never imagined your success would arrive as a tsunami powerful enough to wash away every lie at once. They expected you to crawl away defeated. Instead, you walked out crowned in clarity they never thought you'd access. Your rise turned their gossip into confessions, their slander into self-exposure, their rumors into receipts pointing back to their own intentions. And the irony burns them. The more they tried to bury you, the deeper they buried themselves. Every lie they told became a trapdoor beneath their own feet. Every false charge they loaded became the evidence of their own insecurity, envy, and obsession. Your glow is the crime scene now, chosen one, because it shows exactly who tried to dim it. And this is the part that haunts them most. You didn't rise out of spite. You rose out of destiny. You weren't trying to prove them wrong. You were simply stepping into who you were always meant to be. But your becoming was so bright that it illuminated their shadows. Your elevation was so loud that it drowned out their whispers. Your victory was so divine that it exposed every earthly plot against you. They wanted to destroy your credibility, yet your success became the testimony they can't refute. They wanted your inheritance scattered, yet the universe placed it back in your hands with interest. They wanted your name dragged through the mud, yet it emerged cleaner than ever, while theirs dripped with the residue of the lies they smeared on you. And now they're left scrambling, choking on the smoke of their own downfall, because the detonation you unleashed wasn't just exposure, it was justice, divine and unstoppable. You didn't just rise, chosen one, you erupted. And in that eruption, every mask dropped, every conspirator revealed themselves, every hidden enemy walked into the spotlight they tried to shove you under. Your rise didn't clear your name, it obliterated their entire case. That is why you stand unshaken today. That is why you hold the inheritance they swore you'd lose. That is why every lie they built collapsed in the explosion of your elevation. You were the truth they couldn't kill, and when truth rises, lies don't just fall, they detonate. Number 9, you didn't just flip the script. You became the stage they can't stand on. Chosen one, in this wild saga of criminal charges loading and inheritance battles blazing like wildfire, understand this. You didn't just rewrite the narrative. They never even got to keep the pen. You became the entire stage, the spotlight, the script, and the scene they can't perform in anymore. These people thought they were directing your downfall, choreographing your collapse like some tragic play meant for public consumption. But what they didn't realize is that you were never meant to be an actor in their production. You were the whole arena. When they pushed you to the edge, when they whispered lies, built traps, and rooted for your destruction, they assumed you'd crumble quietly. Instead, your very presence rewrote reality. Your resilience became the lighting. Your truth became the microphone. Your rise became the platform they now choke on. They planned a show where you'd be the villain, stumbling into disgrace, but the moment you stood firm, unshaken, unafraid, unbroken, the entire stage they built started burning under their feet. And that's what they can't stand. Not that you survived, not that you reclaimed the inheritance they tried to steal, but the fact that the same stage they constructed to expose you ended up exposing them. Every lie cracked under the weight of your truth. Every false accusation dissolved in the heat of your integrity. Every whispered plot backfired the moment your spirit refused to bend. They can't stand the stage anymore because it no longer hides them, it highlights them. It shows the audience exactly who was plotting behind the curtains, who was pulling strings in the shadows, who was obsessed with your downfall while you were out here minding your divine purpose. And the irony? They can't even exit the stage now without admitting the truth. They can't rewrite the scene. They can't erase your victory. They can't silence the spotlight that follows you. They tried to cast you out, but now they're the ones stumbling in the light of what they tried to bury. Chosen One, this inheritance case wasn't just a legal battle. It was a cosmic production, a spiritual performance, a divine unveiling. You didn't just flip the script. You became the entire platform they're terrified of stepping on, because every step exposes their fraud, their envy, their sabotage, their hidden hands. Your success is the set they can't rearrange. Your destiny is the stage design they can't cover. Your rise is the echo they can't mute. You are the arena they never prepared for, the space where their lies collapse, the ground that trembles under the weight of your awakening. And here's the truth that haunts them at night. The show they planned to humiliate you has turned into the show that crowns you. You became the headliner. You became the spotlight. You became the entire structure of the moment. Their plots didn't just fail, they elevated you. Their accusations didn't just miss, they amplified you. Their attempted destruction didn't weaken you, it fortified you. Now they can't stand on the same stage because they know standing there means facing the reality that you weren't the villain. They were. You weren't the fraud. They were. You weren't the one losing everything. They were losing control over you. So, Chosen One, keep walking across that stage like it was built for you. Because it was. Not by them, but by the very force that turned every charge into dust. Every trap into testimony, every betrayal into breakthrough. They can't stand on the stage anymore because it belongs to the rightful heir, the one who refused to break, refused to bow, refused to disappear. And that one is you. Number 10. Your survival became the evidence that destroyed their entire case. Chosen One, listen closely, because this is where the entire narrative snaps in half and exposes what really happened behind the scenes. The very thing they were counting on to bury you, your collapse, your silence, your breakdown, became the living, breathing evidence that dismantled every charge they tried to stack against your name. You have to understand the magnitude of what that means. These people didn't just want you to lose an argument or stumble in a moment of weakness. They wanted your entire identity rewritten, your inheritance rerouted, your destiny reassigned, and your spirit permanently discredited. They crafted a case against you with precision, accusations whispered in shadows, stories twisted until they barely resembled reality, lies dressed up as proof, and narratives rehearsed like courtroom testimony. They expected you to crumble under the weight of their fiction. They thought the world would look at you and say, guilty. But here's where the plot flipped so violently it shook the ground beneath every one of your enemies. You survived. And survival, Chosen One, is the one thing a liar can never account for, because survival carries receipts. Your breath, your resilience, your glow, your refusal to fold, those became the counter-arguments they could never suppress. Every day you continued standing was a page of evidence contradicting their entire script. They said you were unstable, yet you walked with clarity. They said you were weak, yet you stood when they expected you crawling. They said you were done, yet you kept rising in ways they couldn't predict or prevent. Your survival became the testimony they couldn't cross-examine, the proof they couldn't shred, the exhibit they couldn't hide. Because let's be honest, if their accusations had any truth to them, you wouldn't have risen. Your spirit would have fractured, your future would have stalled, your energy would have dimmed, but instead, your life became the living contradiction to their plot. You were supposed to be crushed, yet somehow you were glowing. You were supposed to be shamed, yet somehow you carried a quiet authority that no smear campaign could dim. You were supposed to be erased, yet your name kept resurfacing, stronger than before, detached from their lies, and aligned with a destiny bigger than their intentions. They wanted your destruction to be the closing argument. But what they didn't realize is that chosen ones turn pain into evidence and survival into a verdict. And the verdict was simple: not guilty, never guilty, forever destined. In the spiritual court of destiny, your breath was your alibi, your persistence was your defense, your rise was your closing statement, your glow was the sentence handed down, not to you, but to them. Because your survival didn't just protect you, it exposed them. Anyone paying attention could see the truth. No one survives what they put you through unless they were attacked unjustly. No one walks out of sabotage glowing unless the sabotage was rooted in envy. No one rises from false accusations unless the accusations were exactly that, false. Your survival revealed where the rot truly was. It highlighted the darkness in the people who pretended to be light. It unveiled every hidden hand, every covert attack, every manipulative whisper. Your existence became a spotlight they couldn't escape. Chosen one, they dragged your name through the mud, hoping it would stick, but mud always dries, and when it did, the truth became clear. The dirt was never on you. It was always on the hands that threw it. You surviving the storm they manufactured proved the storm was never yours to begin with. You didn't escape your downfall. You outlived their intentions, and that alone collapsed their entire case. Everything they built against you was based on the expectation that you would shatter, but you didn't. And because of that, every lie they whispered, every false charge they loaded, every narrative they rehearsed, fell apart under the weight of your unbreakable presence. So understand this: chosen one, you didn't win because you argued louder. You didn't win because you fought dirty. You won because you lived. And a life that refuses to die under sabotage is the loudest evidence there is. Their case didn't fail because you were lucky. Their case failed because you survived. And surviving, chosen one, is the ultimate proof of innocence. Number 11. The isolation they planned became the throne you ascended on. Chosen one, listen closely, because this part of your journey wasn't accidental. It wasn't a detour. It wasn't some sad season where life abandoned you. No, this was the divine setup. The secret courtroom where your destiny was being finalized behind the scenes while your enemies thought you were being destroyed. The isolation they engineered, the silence they hoped would suffocate you, the loneliness they crafted like a cage. They thought it would break you down into dust, but instead it became the elevation chamber where you discovered who you really were. They dragged your name through dirt, whispered accusations, loaded up their fake criminal charges, and celebrated privately as they imagined you collapsing under the weight of empty rooms and unanswered calls. They thought being cut off from support meant you'd lose your mind, lose your purpose, lose your inheritance. But what they never expected was that silence would become your sanctuary and solitude would become your strategy. You see, chosen one, isolation has always been heaven's favorite training ground. Moses had the wilderness, Joseph had the prison, David had the caves, and you? You had the season they designed as your grave, but heaven used as your throne room. Because while they were plotting your downfall, you were being rewired, recentered, and reintroduced to your own spiritual authority. The very people who abandoned you were unknowingly clearing the space needed for your transformation. They didn't just leave you alone, they left you alone with yourself, and that was their fatal mistake. Because in the quiet, without the noise of manipulators, handlers, and energy thieves, you remembered who you were before the world tried to rewrite you. You found the fire they couldn't burn out, the voice they couldn't silence, the intuition they couldn't tamper with, the destiny they couldn't steal. The isolation that was supposed to suffocate you became the reason you could breathe again. No more false allies, no more half-hearted support, no more masks. In that quiet, you had no distractions, no illusions, just truth. And the truth was simple. You were never the one who needed the crowd. The crowd needed you. They thought taking people away from you would weaken you, but it removed the parasites feeding off your glow. They thought cutting off love would starve you, but it taught you how to generate your own light. They thought silencing the room would intimidate you, but it made your spiritual hearing sharper than ever. They thought isolation would expose your weakness, but it exposed theirs. Because the second you stopped relying on validation and started relying on destiny, the entire balance of power shifted. Suddenly, every lie they told fell apart because there was no chaos left in your life to make you look guilty. Suddenly, every false charge they loaded glitched because your energy no longer matched the narrative they scripted. Suddenly, their entire case against you collapsed because you weren't the desperate, broken figure they painted. You were the chosen one rising from the ashes of their disappointment. And now look at the irony. The very place they sent you to die is the place you discovered your crown. The silence they weaponized became your meditation. The loneliness they mocked became your clarity. The isolation they imposed became your coronation. You didn't escape those empty spaces. You mastered them. You didn't just survive without them. You evolved beyond them. And when you walked out of that isolation, you didn't come out as the wounded victim they prayed for. You emerged as the heir they could no longer deny. That empty room they forced you into, that was your throne room, chosen one. And the moment you sat on it, the whole battlefield flipped, because a chosen one who learns to stand alone becomes a chosen one no enemy can ever stand against. And now, my dear chosen ones, you've seen the battlefield, the strategies, the rise hidden behind silence and strength. This isn't just a story, it's your mirror, your blueprint, your proof that being targeted was never weakness but preparation for unstoppable elevation. If you felt every word strike true, if you recognized the power in your pause and the fire in your rise, then it's time to act. Smash that like button, hit subscribe to stay in the inner circle, drop the number 77 in the comments if you're ready to claim your victory, and share this with every chosen one who needs to hear it.